The award that we're giving Rick McCord is called the Wisdom and Service Award. It is the second time at the School of Theology that we've given this award. The first time was to Zini Fox. Zini, where are you? Yeah, would you just stand? Zini cut her teeth on youth ministry. That's how she why she understands this trajectory well. And we know ourselves that many people begin in ministry and end in ministry and youth ministry, but oftentimes people start there and discern how to move. So Zini, really thank you for all that you've offered us at Collegeville. Again, just to say that, it's an inspiration. So this award is called the Wisdom and Service Award. And with this award, St. John's Abbey and St. John's School of Theology and Seminary honors individuals who have made significant contributions to the wisdom of the church in its formation and development of lay ecclesial ministers. Recipients demonstrate by their personal and professional lives a profound commitment to the pastoral mission of the church. Their commitment through leadership in parishes, organizations, or seminaries and schools of theology advances the practice of ministry and the vocational call to lay ecclesial ministry. The Wisdom and Service Award recipients inspire and empower people. They are servants of the Creator and disciples of Christ Jesus. They respond with generous hearts and ready hands to be co-workers in the vineyard of the Lord, where collaboration, commitment, and a shared vision of where the gospel leads produces an abundant harvest in the vineyard of the Lord. So H. Richard McCord, we are delighted to present you with the Wisdom and Service Award. As former executive director of the Secretariat of Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, you were the principal staff person responsible for lay ecclesial ministry and shepherded the preparation of the bishop's pastoral statement, co-workers in the vineyard of the Lord. You worked tirelessly to bring partners together at the conference and here at St. John's School of Theology and Seminary to strengthen the national will towards a deeper understanding of lay ecclesial ministry as an emerging expression of pastoral leadership worthy of the church's attention and authorization. You were steadfast in advancing the pursuit of excellence in lay ecclesial ministry and in unearthing the challenges that exist in the landscape surrounding it. As a leader in church ministry for more than 40 years, we're not counting, you have always paid attention to the pastoral needs of the church and the empowerment of the laity through the evangelizing mission of the gospel, first in parish ministry, then in diocesan ministry, and finally on the staff of the Bishops' Conference, where you provided leadership for several conference documents: Marriage, Love and Life, and the Divine Plan, Always Our Children, a pastoral message to parents of homosexual children, and suggestions for pastoral ministers, Follow the Way of Love, a pastoral message to families, Blessings of Age, a pastoral message on growing older, and Called and Gifted for the Third Millennium. You capably help pastoral leaders, bishops, priests, deacons, lay ecclesial ministers, and the lay faithful lean into the unknown. You have done this first as a bridge builder, connecting people, generations, and ecclesial understandings. You have contributed to 7 books and 4 national research projects, all of which deals with topics in marriage and family life, lay ecclesial ministry, and church renewal. You have advanced the national understanding of ministerial practice when our own understanding was inadequate. And whenever we felt the ground awkwardly shift below our feet, leaving many feeling like strangers in a collective dark night, you called us back to the urgent mission with a courage often unimaginable. You helped us live into the space of new questions, a space that is still as wide as the Midwest prairie. You have helped us hold this space as sacred, even when the question did not yield an answer. You have been honored by the National Association of Lay Ministry and the National Association of Catholic Family Life Ministers. Your wisdom has been sought in every region of the United States and abroad in Louvain, London, and Rome, and even here in Collegeville. With the Wisdom and Service Award we bestow on you today, we thank you for your work as theologian, pastoral leader, teacher, advisor, and visionary. The four elements illumination from the St. John's Bible tells of the story of God bringing the world out of chaos and making a covenant, of focusing on the abundance provided to the people of the promised land. This illumination is a fitting icon for one who with constancy, steadfastness, and hope continues to encourage the entire church to frame the events of this journey of advancing the role of lay ecclesial minister not as discrete events, but interconnected. You have helped us frame these moments in gold and illuminate the abundance that God has given us. With quietness and humility, you have made visible the rewards of our labors and the steadfastness of God, even in the margins, so that we too may hear again the voice of God say, "Here am I." For guiding our spirits towards a future in which the church will draw on the ministerial gifts of the Holy Spirit of all its members, St. John's School of Theology and Seminary with the St. John's Abbey recognizes you and confers upon you, H. Richard McCord, the Wisdom and Service Award on this 21st day of May, 2015.
Beautiful. Thank you. Most Richard. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Barbara, for that most eloquent recognition and for this beautiful award. I am truly humbled, honored, pleased, and nearly speechless. I say nearly speechless. First thing I'd like to say is I just love how this beautiful award has joined together two realities, wisdom and service, for I believe that wisdom is a gift that's never given for its own sake, but always for the service of the community. And in turn, that service of the community should in some way always lead to deeper wisdom. And so I pray that that has been the case in my life, and I implore the Spirit to shower those gifts on all of you, this beautiful community, that you may realize the fruits of those gifts as well. So thank you. Secondly, I have to say that I just feel so fortunate that I've been asked to receive this award and to celebrate with you in a year when we are celebrating and observing three very important anniversaries. First and foremost, as has already been mentioned, and which is most relevant, of course, to this gathering and to all of your ministries, we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of the U.S. Catholic Bishop's Statement on Lay Ecclesial Ministry, Co-workers in the Vineyard of the Lord. And Barbara had asked me on this occasion if I would offer a few ideas about the anniversary by answering this very open-ended question, now 10 years later, what do we have to celebrate? Now, this could either be a very short presentation or not. But before taking up Barbara's very legitimate and wonderful request, I want to mention the other two anniversaries that I know that we're celebrating in this year also, because a mention of them helps me to contextualize the significance of co-workers and to reflect with you on what it is we can, in fact, celebrate on this 10th anniversary. So, in this year of 2015, we're also observing the 35th anniversary of the very first statement that the U.S. bishops ever wrote about laypersons' roles in society and in church. You probably recall what I'm referring to. It was the statement entitled Called and Gifted, which was published in 1980 and then updated in 1995. Called and Gifted, as I recall way back then, was brief, it was affirming, and it was indeed a groundbreaking statement written to mark yet another important anniversary, namely the closing 15 years before that of the Second Vatican Council and the Council's promulgation of the first ever decree on the apostolate of the laity. So happily, in this year of 2015, we have the convergence, the confluence of three important related anniversaries. 50 years ago, Vatican II opened a new door, inviting lay people to come in from the cold, to move from the margins of church life to its very center. And 35 years ago, our bishops welcomed the laity at the threshold of that new door and described in general terms the possibilities, the new possibilities that were being opened to them at the time. And finally, just a mere 10 years ago, the bishops recognized that lay men and women had already crossed over that threshold and had embarked on various pathways of discipleship, one of which was the specific pathway and vocation of lay ecclesial ministry. So here we are. Recognizing the significance, the sequence of these anniversaries, I'm proposing that the main thing, the principal thing that we're called to celebrate 10 years after co-workers is that ongoing, that widely shared journey of faith, both personal and ecclesial, that began half a century ago. It's a journey in which the dual realities of being called and gifted have been a strong, consistent point of reference for the Catholic layperson's experience and identity. I know it has been for me, and I hope you share that as well. It's also a journey that reached a point of very timely focus, needed clarity, and official recognition for a specific segment of the U.S. Catholic laity when the bishops issued Co-workers in the Vineyard of the Lord, the resource for guiding the development of lay ecclesial ministry. When I was employed by the Bishops' Conference, I used to bring these and other things along. I used to hold them up and say, and they are available for sale after this conference, but no more. Co-workers, I believe, was a high point in this journey that I'm proposing to you, but it wasn't the starting point, and neither will it be the ending point. Instead, it's one of many points, many places on the journey that we've been traveling together. And so, in addition to the achievement of co-workers itself, which I think is significant, it's the total, the 50-year journey that needs to be celebrated now with realism and hope, with pride and gratitude. For as we say in the liturgy, indeed it is truly right and just, always and everywhere, that we should do so. But what more specifically can I offer you about this journey so as to understand and appreciate what exactly it is we're celebrating? In the remainder of my time, then, I'm going to use this journey metaphor and propose and respond briefly to 5 questions. First, what kind of journey have we been taking? Second, what have been some of the milestones along the journey? Third, what progress have we made? What challenges have we encountered on the journey? Fourth, who have been some of our dear companions on the journey? And finally, what still lies ahead? I think you'll find that my response to these questions will be, in fact, is influenced so much by many things in my life, not the least of which is a personality trait of mine which inclines me always to see the glass as half full rather than half empty. So, with that caveat, let's look at the first question. What kind of journey have we been taking together? Has our journey as lay ecclesial ministers had a goal, a sense of direction? Has it been a purposeful one and not just an experience of wandering around in the desert? Yes, yes, yes. I think we have been heading in a direction that is worthy of all our striving. The bishops imagined co-workers, in their words, as a roadmap for the journey, and they described it as a call to church leaders, ordained and lay, to become more intentional, more effective in ordering and integrating lay ecclesial ministers within the ministerial life and structures of our dioceses. And then they said, as a corollary to this, that they wanted their document to express a strong desire for the fruitful collaboration of ordained and lay ministers who, in distinct but complementary ways, continue in the Church the saving mission of Christ for the world, which is his vineyard. Cardinal Avery Dulles, of happy memory, played a major role in the early development and eventual approval of co-workers, and shortly after it was published, he gave a lecture in which he expressed his hope that as a result of co-workers, lay ecclesial ministers would now receive the recognition they so richly deserve, and that this recognition by the Church would in turn help laity as a whole to rise to the challenges and opportunities that are theirs today. Finally, noted theologian Richard Gallardi, whom I'm sure many of you know and who has been a friend of mine for a while, has described co-workers as an important moment in the process of ecclesial reception. This process was taking place before the bishop's statement was ever conceived and continues now 10 years after it. So we're in ecclesial reception, folks. And so, based on these few notions of what the bishop said about their intent and what Rick Gallardi has observed about the effect, I'd say that the kind of journey that we're celebrating today is a search for fuller reception by the Church, more lasting integration into its structures, more effective ordering by its hierarchy, and overall greater recognition and affirmation of what the bishops first welcomed in 1980 as the gift, their words, the gift of lay ecclesial ministry. To describe the journey in these terms is to acknowledge, I think, that lay ecclesial ministry is indeed a new reality in the Church, something that takes time to absorb, to make sense of. It began to take shape in our country shortly after the close of the Second Vatican Council with the emergence of parish directors of religious education and youth ministers. Gradually, our bishops acknowledged this significant new development and began to study it. Similar developments occurred in other countries as laypersons began to undertake various roles of pastoral leadership for which they had received the necessary formation and authorization. When thinking about the relative newness of lay ecclesial ministry, I turned to another friend and person I think well known to you, Dr. Ed Hannenberg, who has called the emergence of lay ecclesial ministry one of the several very important ministerial transformations in the Church's history. That's a major claim, I think. Why? Why does Ed say this? Because it's a new way of experiencing ministry, a new way of thinking about the scope of ministry, a new set of people doing it. Ed compares this to the transformation in ministry that took place with the rise of monasticism in the 5th century, or the birth of mendicant orders in the 13th century, or the flowering of women's religious communities in the 19th century. In each of these cases, ministry was reimagined and expanded. The new form being introduced did not replace the previous one, but rather the two began to coexist, with the newer form gradually becoming integrated into the life of the church. And now, centuries later, it's as if it was always there. It's as if we have always done it that way. Dr. Hannenberg expresses the hope, which I truly share, that lay ecclesial ministry will follow along in the same path. The gradual integration into the church's life is what we call ecclesial reception. It's the journey we're making right now. We have historical precedents for it, and so we can appreciate why it takes time, effort, patience. 50 years represents a task well begun, but far, far from done. But nonetheless, today, let's celebrate the journey, the purposeful journey, the journey with a meaning. And now let's turn our attention to the second question: what milestones could we observe and have we observed on this journey? Milestones mark forward progress, remind us how far we've come. In our 50-year history, there have been so many, and so let me name just a few. First, there are the official church statements from both universal and local levels. These are the building blocks that rest upon one another, progressively building a structure, filling it out, giving shape, purpose, direction to our journey. From Vatican II, we have the Constitution on the Church, the Decree on the Apostolate of the Laity, to mention just two. These enunciated important teachings on such things as the universal call to holiness, the participation of laity and clergy in the one ministry of Christ as priest, prophet, and king, the place of charisms in the life of the community, the right of lay persons to be appointed to public roles of service in the church, and many more. In the years after Vatican II, the U.S. bishops began a uniquely inductive process of observing, describing, dialoguing, and reflecting upon the different forms of that lay ministry was taking here in our own midst. And as early as 1980, with their first statement, Called and Gifted, they identified a group of laity who were preparing themselves for professional ministry in the church. And they called these persons ecclesial ministers. And they welcomed them as a new development and as a gift to the church. 15 years later, in Called and Gifted for the Third Millennium, the bishops spoke about this new development again in greater detail and distinguishing between two legitimate areas of lay activity, namely witness and service in society, and then what they called again ecclesial ministry in the church. And this ministry, they pointed out, is being exercised in various areas of church life, and for many persons it means more than just a job. It is being experienced as a true calling from God. And Co-workers, as you are well aware, builds on these two documents, but takes a giant leap forward by offering a comprehensive theological rationale for lay ecclesial ministry that is anchored solidly in the conciliar and post-conciliar magisterium on the church. It also sets forth practical guidance for such things as discernment, education, formation, authorization, employment of lay ecclesial ministers. In addition to these important milestones that we find in statements from bishops, there's a second kind of milestone, which I would say is represented by research projects, some of which were sponsored by the bishops, national symposia, notably the ones convened here at this university's School of Theology, the contributions made by many national ministry associations over the course of the past 4 decades. An example of the latter is the creation of a national certification process for several different lay ecclesial ministry roles. So pastoral research, deepening theological reflection and precision, the convening of individuals and organizations around issues and projects, all of these activities have advanced the process of ecclesial reception. Each of them has marked an important, necessary step on our journey, and together they've given us a way to measure progress. They're integral to the journey of lay ministry that we speak of and celebrate today. So, yes, we can speak of progress on the journey, but we also have to acknowledge, honestly, the challenges that we have experienced that have produced setbacks, course corrections, dead ends in some cases. Most journeys include all of those elements. So let's turn our attention to those in the next question. What kinds of progress have we made? What challenges have we experienced along the way? The growth and development of lay ecclesial ministry over the past 50 years is something that we can measure, thanks to the periodic national research conducted first by the National Pastoral Life Center, and then up until now and including even the various gathering we had earlier today by the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, known as CARA. I want to share with you a few highlights about parish-based, just parish-based lay ecclesial ministry that have come out of a recent report done by CARA at the end of 2014. You will find in your red folders a one-page handout that I prepared. It looks like this. It's called Parish-Based Lay Ecclesial Ministry, Some Trends and Highlights. And so it's yours. Keep it, read it later. I'm going to talk through this, but I don't want anybody to feel like he or she is missing these gems because it's already written down for you. There are 8 highlights. First, today, Kara tells us, there are more than 39,000 lay ecclesial ministers in the United States. Note, this is more than double the number that there were in 1990. Second, lay ecclesial ministers account for 40% of all parish staff members involved in ministry. Nearly 60% of them work full-time, 80% are women. Third, although the median age of parish lay ecclesial ministers is 55, and some of us may think that's pretty old, it's actually younger than the median age for priests and religious. There is, happily, an increase in younger generations, with an estimated 40% of lay ecclesial ministers being under the age of 50. Great. Fourth, the younger generation of parish lay ecclesial ministers is more racially and ethnically diverse. While still only about 10% of those who currently serve as lay ecclesial ministers are Hispanic or Latino, nonetheless 47% of the 22,000 persons enrolled currently in formation programs are Hispanic or Latino. So in the future, it would seem to me that the face of lay ecclesial ministry will more closely resemble the face of the U.S. Catholic Church, what it is becoming. Fifth, because a younger generation of lay ecclesial ministers tends to be better educated, the total percentage of those holding graduate degrees is nearly 50%. Over 75% of students enrolled in diocesan ministry formation programs receive at least a partial financial subsidy from their diocese for the work in which they are engaged. Sixth, in the past 15 years, there's been a steady increase in the percentage of priests who say that parish life would be enhanced by more full-time lay ecclesial ministers, and that, in general, the Church needs to move faster in empowering lay persons for ministry. 7, the percentage of lay ecclesial ministers who consider their work to be a vocation, not just a job, continues at a very high level, with 89% responding yes to this question. And finally, number 8, around 90% of lay ecclesial ministers report a high level of satisfaction with their parish, and about the same percentage of parishioners report that the ministry they receive is good or excellent. All good news. I think the glass is half full. Gives me a chance to take another sip. All these data points that have just rolled over your head are, I think, strong indicators that lay ecclesial ministers, especially those serving in parish positions, have become an essential and defining characteristic of how the Church carries out its mission here in the United States. So there is no longer any reason, if there ever was one, to regard these wonderful people as temporary help, as substitutions for clergy, or worse, as aberrations. The harvest is still great, and many different kinds of workers are still being called into it at every hour of the day. While we have good reason to celebrate these signs of growth and progress, we also need to acknowledge the bumps in the road, the detours, the roadblocks that we've encountered along the way. And so here are a few that occur to me. I'm sure more will occur to you as well, but let's just be content with these for a moment. Number one, the language of lay ecclesial ministry still may not resonate well enough in minority communities. Over the years, I've been part of many conversations in which African Americans and Latinos say that they don't see themselves reflected in much of what coworkers says and how it says it. There is a perception that the bar is set too high when it comes to educational and professional credentials. Leadership that arises from and is formed by grassroots experience does not seem to be valued as much as it should. Second, lay ecclesial ministers themselves regard a diocesan process of authorization as extremely important for validation, support, and for the clarification of relationships. However, nearly 40% of dioceses have no formal process. Only 27% have a written policy on authorization. Only 20% of lay ecclesial ministers report that their diocese has a requirement for certification, and 40% say there is no public commissioning or installation ceremony for lay ecclesial ministers. In addition, as we have heard over the past day or so here in this program, there's been a very slow response to the national certification process. So clearly, we have a long way to go regarding diocesan and national support for the bishop's responsibility to bring order to the ministries under his care. Third point, members of a younger generation who are thankfully moving into lay ecclesial ministry are doing so after earning academic degrees, in many cases, as a preparation for their work. But this means that many will be carrying debt from student loans. But the median full-time salary for the parish lay ecclesial minister is a little less than $28,000, so only a few $1,000s over the official poverty rate. This would be even more problematic, except for the fact that 81% of married lay ecclesial ministers have a spouse who is bringing home a second income. But you have to ask, how long is this situation sustainable, especially for younger families who want to have children? Continuing to pay better salaries, therefore, is essential, but also is finding additional ways to support the livelihood of the lay ecclesial minister. And fourth and finally, I've been away from the USCCB, as I said now, for more than 3 years, so I'm not in a position to say how much or how little the current crop of bishops supports what their older brethren wrote in Co-Workers. I've heard anecdotally that some have stricken lay ecclesial ministry or lay ecclesial minister from their diocesan vocabulary, or have withdrawn support for diocesan formation programs. It's not always clear what this means. So as we measure the steps we've taken forward, we also note the ones that slow our progress, that have moved us backward. But all the while, I feel we need to be trusting that more forces are propelling us ahead on the journey, so let's celebrate them, persevere through the others. Speaking of perseverance, it reminds me to move on to the next question about people, and your perseverance too, thank you, about people who have persevered with us on this journey. At the risk of leaving out many, I can only name a few as examples of companions on our journey. In the early days of the 1970s and 80s, what we now call ecclesial ministry was championed by many gifted, generous priests and religious, among them Brother Lachlan Sofield, Sister Florida Rodman, Monsignor Phil Murnian, Father Joe Merkt, Bishops Ed McCarthy, Raymond Lucker, Albert Ottenweller, all of whom brought theological and pastoral expertise to help a new fledgling group of church ministers become established, get their feet on the ground. Beginning around the same time and extending for many years thereafter, we were blessed with the leadership of Dolores Leckie at the Bishops' Conference, Dr. Zini Fox for her theological scholarship and teaching, Lucian Roy, Zoila Diaz, John Reed, Sue Alcesser for building and leading the National Association for Lay Ministry. As the U.S. bishops began their process in the mid-1990s that eventually led to producing co-workers, we came to recognize the contributions of people like Fred Hoffheinz of the Lilly Endowment, which we often called the Church's One Foundation. Sister Amy Hoy, Dr. Ed Hannenberg, Dr. Marty Jewell, Dr. Bill Johnston, Sister Breed Long, Jean Marie Weber, Cardinals Francis George of happy memory and Avery Dulles the same, Bishops Joe Delaney, Jerry Kikanis, all of whom joined forces with many others to bring us to where we are now at this 10th anniversary moment. So as we lift up individual companions, I also mention briefly some organizational companions which have contributed significantly. I'm thinking particularly of this university's School of Theology for sponsoring, organizing 2 major national symposia, for the 2 research forums that produce books of great scholarly and pastoral value. I'm uniquely, immensely grateful to the leadership and creativity of Jeff Castor, Bill Cahoy, Barbara Sutton, Vic Klamoski, and their wonderful team here at St. John's. Kara's consistent research efforts and reports on parish life and ministry have made it also a welcome companion on the journey. And the same is true of the National Association for Lay Ministry for convening, pulling together, holding together 5 national ministry associations over a period of years to carry out the Emerging Models of Pastoral Leadership project, which came to a conclusion in 2012. Also a shout out in order today to the Canon Law Society of America for its valuable work on the authorization of lay ecclesial ministers, which was reported on, discussed here both yesterday and I think earlier today. And finally, let us recognize that we have been companions to one another in the process of bringing lay ecclesial ministry to where it is today. Gatherings like this one are welcome spots, welcome stops, welcome oases on the journey where we can offer mutual support, share stories, learn new ideas and practices, engage in conversation, commiseration, celebration. Thank you, St. John's and the Benedictine community, for all of these opportunities. Our journey has been truly blessed to include so many individual, organizational, corporate companions who have pointed us the way and helped us to continue to move forward. And with that, I come to the final question. What is it that lies ahead? What do I see, at least? I said earlier that the publication of Co-Workers was not the end of our journey. Rather, it's a new point of departure, because it gave us a renewed sense of energy and a sharper focus for continuing the work. How is this so? What do I mean? If we acknowledge that the thrust of our journey is the full integration, or, as I said before, the ecclesial reception of lay ecclesial ministry into the life of the church, then I suggest that Co-Workers presents a wonderful methodology for doing precisely this. It's a 3-step process. The very structure of Co-Workers exemplifies the process, and I think the same process provides us with an agenda until at least the next significant anniversary that I may or may not be with you to celebrate. I hope I will. The 3 steps are these: naming, claiming, and sustaining lay ecclesial ministry. Taken together, they are components of what I mean by ecclesial reception. They are the general tasks we need to address if we want to move closer to that goal of integrating lay ecclesial ministers into the life of the church as Co-Workers proposes. So, Co-Workers itself begins by naming, by identifying the realities associated with lay ecclesial ministry. How did it arise in the church? What are its distinctive characteristics? How is it similar to and different from other kinds of lay participation? What sorts of ministerial roles might be examples? How many people are serving in these roles? Co-workers draws upon the experience of the U.S. Church to answer these and other questions. It names our experience. It honors it. It makes it a starting point for our deeper reflection. But we know that realities are always changing, and therefore naming is an ongoing task. It doesn't happen just once. Through research, through collecting stories of lay ministers themselves, through convening people for study and conversation, through staying in touch with new questions, new models, new voices, new issues in the church and the world, we continue the task of naming the realities and using them as the starting point for responding in the next two steps, which are claiming and sustaining. Second step is claiming, and this is a task of affirming and legitimizing. To claim is to bring someone or something into a firmer relationship, making a connection between it and a larger whole. Co-workers does this precisely for lay ecclesial ministry when it explains the new reality in theological terms, showing how it can be understood as consistent with an ecclesiology of communion and mission. This activity of claiming sets lay ecclesial ministry on a much firmer foundation and helps us to claim it as legitimate. Claiming also is an ongoing task. So we need to continue the conversations that help us to connect lay ecclesial ministry with what is best in our theological tradition, in our canonical practice. And so I encourage universities, schools of theology and ministry, other institutions to continue pursuing this goal, especially in collaboration with bishops, priests, deacons, and lay ecclesial ministers themselves. And finally, I thought I'd never reach that point, there is that third step of sustaining what we've named and what we have been claiming. This is the step of setting up institutional structures and services that support lay ecclesial ministers. Co-workers begins to identify some of these, such as a diocesan certification process, a procedure for authorization, a set of policies for the workplace, formation programs with a comprehensive curriculum, methods to help a person discern a vocational path, and so on. I think we're just at the early stages of figuring out what is needed at the institutional levels of the church and responding in a helpful way. There are still too many gaps in coverage. Too many lay ecclesial ministers are still left to fend for themselves and do not experience two-way accountability between themselves and church authorities. So, collecting, analyzing, publicizing good models and practices for the sustainability of lay ecclesial ministry as a stable feature in church life will continue to be essential. Working on each of these three tasks in an ongoing way of naming, claiming, and sustaining, I think will move us forward on this journey, especially when lay ecclesial ministers come together in peer gatherings such as this one today and the ones which took place here in recent months and which are still planned for the future here at this university. These conversations are so essential now and in the years ahead for mutual support, for sharpening a sense of identity, for building collaborative skills, and for renewing our commitment to be the missionary-oriented church of mercy to which Pope Francis so insistently and consistently calls us. As that famous gospel hymn says, "We've come this far by faith, and we can't turn around now." So on the 10th anniversary of Co-workers in the Vineyard of the Lord, we've got a lot to celebrate. If you've got any champagne left, raise a glass. It's not only the continuing value of this document that we celebrate, but also the continuing journey of 50 years so far, in which Co-workers has become the guiding beacon. So let's celebrate that journey, a journey with a clear direction, a journey marked by many important milestones, a journey that included steps forward, steps backwards, steps sideways, a journey that has been made with so many blessed companions, and a journey that's far from completed. And with that in mind, let's recommit to journeying onward in faith, in hope, and love as co-workers in the vineyard of the Lord. Over this way, okay.